Welcome to the 33rd Annual California Small Farm Conference session on land access. My name is Jamie Fanous. I'm a policy advocate with CAFF. I want to first acknowledge that I'm attending this session from the ancestral homelands of the Patwin people and would encourage you to identify where you're located. I'm going to drop in a handy link into the chat, and you can use, it's a pretty incredible map where you can see where you're currently located. A few logistical items before we get started here. I want to thank all of you panelists, attendees, panelists, and sponsors for making this possible. Please, when you get a chance, check out the expo hall to learn more about our sponsors. This conference was made free, but to sustain and grow the event, please consider donating to the California Small Farm Conference. This webinar will be recorded. Alert, this will be recorded and posted to the CAFF YouTube channel. So look for a follow-up email with more details if you'd like to kind of revisit what we talk about here. So just kind of moving into some more language here on the session and some introduction information. Again, just for folks that are coming in, please remain muted. But yeah, so we're going to start this session with an open discussion among the panelists and then move into questions with you all. Please, but utilize the chat function to introduce yourself, ask questions throughout the session. Although it is an open forum, to manage time, we'll be taking questions primarily through the chat. If you'd prefer to ask your question using audio and video, please raise your hand at that time and use the reaction button on the bottom corner, and we'll get to you if time permits. So I just wanted to start this session kind of with a grounding around the historical realities of land access that's kind of contributed to this deep and systemic issue. And it's a story of historical dispossession and continued discrimination that has contributed to the barriers for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Indigenous and Native American people involved in food production, stewardship, gathering on traditional ancestral land have faced displacement and relegation since before the founding of this country. The number of Black farmers and Black landowners have drastically declined since 1920, where 1 in 7 farmers was Black, over 925,000 nationwide, together owning over 16 million acres of farmland. By 1997, when Pickford versus Glickman, a USDA lawsuit was fought, Black farmers were losing 30,000 acres per month. By 1999, those numbers fell to 18,000 farmers owning just 2.3 million acres. The loss of those farmers has been attributed in large part due to discriminatory practices by the USDA, which the department has admitted. Latinx make up the vast majority of the nation's farm workers, but very few are able to start their own farm operations. 3 out of 4 hired farm workers are foreign-born, but USDA loans and programs are limited to US citizens, making it nearly impossible for a majority of farm workers to start their own farms. A drastic demographic shift among Asian Americans began with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and later in 1913, when California Alien Land Law prohibited Asian Americans from owning land. Just between 1920 and 1930, Japanese-owned farmland dropped by more than 40%. Today, California loses 50,000 acres of farmland and ranch land each year. The average age of farmers and ranchers continues to rise, with many reaching retirement age. With the shrinking supply of land, prices have soared. In the last 5 years alone, land prices in California have increased by 36%. The skyrocketing of prices puts land purchase even further out of reach for beginning and BIPOC growers and allows large-scale operations, or these days, folks like Bill Gates, to buy up land and consolidate. making farmland further and further out of reach for small-scale growers. For beginning growers who do not have the privilege of inheriting land or generational wealth, which is common among white farmers, there are nearly no avenues for BIPOC farmers to own land. Acknowledging today that we won't have the answers, but this is critical to talk about as members in the agriculture, as we are collectively members in the agricultural community, and can work to combat these very real racial injustices and collectively break down barriers for beginning and BIPOC growers and allow them to thrive. Today, we'll hear from farmers and organizational allies that are working to create alternative avenues around this major systemic barrier. These stories are unique and do not represent the norm, but offer opportunities for models and collective action. So I wanted to kind of share that history for everyone before we start entering into this discussion, because those are the barriers that we have to deal with. Those are the barriers that we collectively need to be mobilized to break down collectively in our communities and find solutions. And each of our panelists here today are part of those models and part of those collective solutions, and can kind of give us a sneak peek into some opportunities that we should be thinking about for our own communities, and even to think about as a state action or national action. So now I'm going to enter in some questions for the panelists. This is an opportunity for them to introduce themselves and then just immediately start to address some of these questions. So my first question is, in the vein of this idea of collective action and community engagement, tell us about the programs you're involved with and how they can act as guides or models for others to bypass many of the barriers you guys have collectively experienced. Let's start. I think the first person that's on my window is Leonard. So let's start with Leonard Diggs.
Hello, everyone. Good to see at least one familiar face for sure, maybe quite a few more, but I want to give a shout out to Tom Heller, who I see sitting there in the crowd, and good to see you, and the smile that comes. So my name is Leonard Diggs, and I'm the Director of Operations for Pie Ranch. And one of the projects that I'm working on the most for Pie Ranch is our Cascade Regenerator farm. And we're just getting that party started. We haven't been doing it for that long, but we have some really strong goals in regards to what the 418 acres that's represented at a Cascade is designed to do. We're hoping that this historical ranch, been around for a really long time, starts taking on some new avenues, and it's uniquely located in San Mateo County between Half Moon Bay and Santa Cruz, or San Francisco and Santa Cruz, depending on what your references are. And our goal is to create a collaboration and solidarity, one that's designed for a solidarity with equity. You know, we want to make sure that we engage a whole generation of farmers who haven't had a chance to farm. Most of them are women. You know, we'd like to see at least 50% of the people in our program be women. And then we'd also like to have a whole group of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color on the farm who haven't necessarily had a chance in the recent history to be in farming. Many generations of them have been farming all over the world and all over this country, but maybe many of them haven't been farming recently. So we'd like to re-expose them. And there's anybody else who would like to farm and hasn't had a chance to farm, we'd like to provide those opportunities. And I think that the key question is, you know, what can we do to maintain the relationships and retain the environment? And those relationships are between community members and farmers, and community members and their environment, and farmers and their environment. And so we're very focused on all of that as part of this program.
Thanks, Leonard.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Kendra next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Johnson, calling in today from my Salmon ecologist husband's office on Pomo ancestral land in Sonoma County. It's an honor to be with you on this panel. With my own farming experience and many years of working with beginning farmers, experienced farmers, landholders, land trusts, um, much of it on the intersection between conservation and tenure, landed me eventually here with Agrarian Trust, a national nonprofit, bringing to bear a new model for community land ownership in service of future generations. I think we, as we're acknowledging, thank you, Jamie, for that great introduction. We really are at a critical crossroads where land protection and care must be linked holistically to more equitable access and secure tenure by good farmers and ranchers. And I want to make a distinction there that access is great, tenure is better. We really need to remember that security and the ability to grow a good business, build equity, invest in land care are essential to that reconnection that Leonard was talking about. As Jamie just pointed out, Indigenous, Black, Latinx, and other immigrant and communities of color have been overtly or covertly, violently or fraudulently, intentionally or ignorantly dispossessed and barred from America's most productive lands for hundreds of years now, dislocating generations of communities from their connection, stewardship, and ownership of land. So at Agrarian Trust, we believe that restoration, reparations, and reform of land ownership are all called for, and we're all called upon to listen and learn about what true land justice might look like. Agrarian Trust, as a small nonprofit, won't correct most of the systemic issues that we will be discussing today, nor, I'm sorry to say, can any well-meaning nonprofit. This is something we have to do together. What AT has done is to develop a vessel for community land ownership, stewardship, and viable access to be used and shared across the US. It draws from models from around the world, requesting input of a large and diverse stakeholder advisory group, relying on the creative legal work of the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Now about a dozen agrarian commons have been formed across the country in places as diverse as Vermont, West Virginia, Minnesota, Tennessee, Montana, Washington. Here in Northern California, a group of farmers and community members north of Sacramento organized themselves into the Capay Valley Agrarian Commons. Capay Valley is in Patwin on Wintun land near where Sri is, named for stream in Patwin. This valley is incredibly important ecologically and agriculturally. It's the ancestral land of the Yochadihi, which is a current day nation. Legacy of Black land ownership in the valley stretches back to the late 1800s, and over 40% of today's population in the Capay Valley is Latinx. One generation ago, an organic farming movement took root in that valley, giving rise to some of the West's most known innovators in organic production and community-supported agriculture, many of whom are probably participating in this conference. These farms are mostly white-owned, are feeding thousands of families in the greater Sac Valley and Bay areas, and most don't know what their future holds. So the Agrarian Commons model goes like this. There's a national 501c3 nonprofit land trust, Agrarian Trust, which offers legal support, education and awareness, and strength in numbers and networking. The local C2 Commons operate like a community land trust. They're governed by local boards that require farmer and other community representation. Those commons can acquire land by receiving donations or mounting a campaign to purchase or a combination thereof. The commons then convey lifetime leases to high priority farmers and ranchers subject to careful stewardship and other community values. Farmers are guaranteed land security and the ability to build equity in their businesses, their infrastructure, even soil and other improvements. The model allows communities in this way to invest in the restoration and soil health of these lands, as well as other community values at the foundation of their food systems. It takes land off of the market, the commodity real estate market, and into the hands of communities. So in the Capay Valley, the board there is currently exploring the purchase of a large diverse farm property, which could shore up an important valley business, providing security for that business to transition safely to its intended successors, which are farm employees, in the coming years. So I think of this C2 Commons as like a vessel. Think of it as a gourd. Its bylaws, its relationship to Agrarian Trust are similar to the other gourds around the country, but each community will shape, beautify, and utilize its gourd a little bit differently. I think I'll leave it at that for right now.
Thanks, Kendra. I'm going to hand it over to our next panelist, Joaquin Jimenez. I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Joaquin Jimenez, I'm in Half Moon Bay, the coast, San Mateo County. I work with a nonprofit organization, ALAS, in Half Moon Bay. We also have been developing this nonprofit organization, Rancho San Benito. It's a farming co-op to help farm workers get access to farmland to start a business. So we developed this co-op, Rancho San Benito, about 4 years ago. We started this when there was an initiative in Half Moon Bay to start growing cannabis here in our greenhouses. We didn't want cannabis to come into our community because how it will affect undocumented community and non-citizens, so we went against it. After we proposed that cannabis was not welcome in Half Moon Bay, we started this program, the farming co-op, to make use of the land that we have in the coast. And just so you know, the San Mateo coast has at least 1,000 acres that has not been farmed in several years. And even with that land being there, it's hard for people of color, in this case, Latinos, to have access to the farmland. We have been going, receiving training learning about a co-op, farming co-op, being educated about different implementations, on the farmland. We do a lot of work with our farm workers in the community from Montera to down to the county line to Santa Cruz County. So I am familiar with pretty much every farm that you can think of in the San Mateo coast. In Pescadero, where Leonard is, Pine Ranch. I'm very familiar with Pine Ranch, Año Nuevo, Musis, Marquee, pretty much every farm that you can think of on the coast, I'm familiar with, because I do a lot of work with the farm workers. I do a lot of advocacy for the farm workers, and with that, this farming co-op is to give our farm workers the opportunity to farm on their own. To bring extra income into their homes. I don't know if you're familiar, but an average farm worker brings about $25,000 a year of income. That's an average. We have from the least, making 15,000 up to 35,000. That's not a lot. With that, any more they make out of that, they'll be affected by the health insurance. They will not qualify by, with the health insurance. So creating this co-op is to help, farm workers bring extra income into their homes. We do a lot of collaboration with a lot of organizations in the area. For example, with the RCD, Resource Center here in San Mateo County, about educating our community about different practices that will help our environment, carbon sequestration being one of them, about healthy soils, Tierra Fértil. We also collaborate with members of the Green Foothills here in San Mateo County, also with members of the Sierra Club. So we collaborate with a lot of groups. The director of the farmers market here in the coast. We do a lot of collaboration to be able to have access for the land. One of the first problems that we encountered was about finding grants that will help us start a farming co-op. Now we have the funding to do it, so that's that's not a problem anymore. But still, having access to the farmland to start this co-op, we find very difficult. When I learned about the National Young Farmers Coalition, I learned that it goes throughout, across the country. How it is difficult for a person of color to have access to this farmland. There's a lot of research that has been done of how giving the opportunity to people of color to farm is not really. It's it's a systemic racism. Let's put it like what it is. We are not given the opportunity. When I introduced the farming co-op to our local farm bureau, many of them did not agree with it. It was put fear into them that they might lose their employees. It's hard to make it in the coast. In San Mateo County, if you make a family of four, if you make less than $120,000 a year, right, you're below the poverty level. We have families of farm workers that make less than $50,000 a year. So even with that, it's not giving the opportunity. The farm workers have the knowledge. There's very, very few Latino farmers in the coast. And many of them, and I think it's only one of them that actually has received, land, or not from them, but he's working the land of a nonprofit organization in San Mateo County, Post Land Trust. But it's not. We don't see equity in that. It's not an equity. What we want to do is to make sure give the opportunity to our farm workers to become farmers. Looking into other programs like ALBA in Salinas, who's willing to share their curriculum to educate our farm workers about how to run a business, how to do the marketing, how to do the budget. With that, everything else will fall under Rancho San Benito, the name of the Rancho San Benito Incorporated. That will be the ones with the equipment to work the land. We will be helping with the distribution of the crops. And Rancho San Benito will not see a penny, from the income that will generate in this farming co-ops. It will go directly to the farm workers to give them the opportunity to learn more about what farming is. Not as a farm worker, but as a farmer, running a business. So it is just very difficult. We have been rejected, on our proposals, even with the organizations that we are working with. So I don't think it's our proposal. I don't think it's the organizations that we're collaborating with, because we are very interested, in saving and protecting our open spaces for farming. We are very interested in conserving our heritage, the coastside, what it is, farming and ranching, but we are just not given the opportunity. Somebody is holding us back. And I know Leonard was talking about Pie Ranch. They're very interested in working, giving the opportunity to women, for farming. Rancho San Benito is giving the opportunity to everybody. We don't specify of gender if you're a man or a woman. Anybody who wants to farm, we want to give them the opportunity, the education to be successful in a farming business. So that's what Rancho San Benito is about. When we talk about history, the reason that we go on the Rancho San Benito, Half Moon Bay was actually known as Rancho San Benito between 1840 and 1850. During the transition from being a Mexican territory to becoming a U.S. territory. It was the land grant that it was given to Juan Candelario in the 1830s, in the late 1830s. So it was Rancho San Benito, that's what it was known, which is from the Purísima Creek to the Pilarcitos Creek area. So that's why it's Rancho San Benito.
Thanks so much, Joaquin. I think we're gonna hand it over to Liya, and then we'll enter into some questions. So please, if you have any questions for today's panel, please drop them into the chat. We might open up some time for people to ask directly using their audio and video, but it's gonna depend on time. So I'll hand it over to Liya.
Great, thank you so much for having me, and it's so wonderful to be amongst all of you farm friends here today. Thanks for joining us. My name is Liya Schwartzman, and I am the Senior Program Manager for the Equity and Conservation on Working Lands program with California Farmlink. California Farmlink was founded in 1999 as a reaction to really address the inequity of services and access to land for farmers of color specifically and beginning farmers. And in 2013, we became a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution as well, so that we could further address the inequity that we see in financing for underserved and underbanked communities in California. We address these two issues and we acknowledge that there continues to be inequitable access to nonprofit services, to financing, and absolutely to land access. And I echo Kendra's sentiment that we also really need to highlight that land tenure and land security is also an essential component to land access. Just access to land is, if insecure, it can almost be as challenging. So we address these issues. We have a land access program, which is now called Equal Equity and Conservation on Working Lands, which is a work in progress, but it addresses this issue as best as we can by first offering a land portal, which is a user-generated platform for land seekers and landholders to find each other. And we also offer individual technical assistance in supporting folks in coming together to communicate openly and develop and negotiate equitable agreements that offer that secure tenure. In addition, we offer educational programming, including our Regenerator, which is a farm business resilience program, as well as we're going to be rolling out in March here a wealth building program, which addresses the same educational spectrum, but done completely in Spanish for Spanish-speaking farmers on the coast. And soon to also be rolling out a succession planning intensive, which is going to assist farm families and their successors, whether those are family heirs or non-heir successors, in developing succession plans and resources. And as I said, we're also a CDFI, which is essentially a lender with a purpose. We offer loans up to 1.75 million. Land loans, 44% of our land loans go to farmers of color, not including women. That number would be bigger if it was including women as well. And 86% of our production loans and equipment and infrastructure loans go to farmers of color. And we continue to work towards reaching those communities who need this financing the most, who have been discriminated against, intentionally kept out of the financial institutions spectrum of what is considered to be a good bet as far as lending towards those populations, and we work to bring down those barriers as best as we are able to with our small team. I should say we cover all of California, but we have a main office in Aptos, which is basically vacant right now, but their main office is in Aptos, California. I'm located in Sacramento along with my colleague Lola Quazabarth, and we have a North Coast representative, Carrie McGrath, who runs that Regenerator program. And I just so appreciate everyone coming here together to share the room and the energy around trying to tackle an issue that has no solutions and many solutions. It is land access and land tenure. I've heard my whole career, I've been working for 10 years, oh, that's a thing that is important to farmers, and that's a barrier to farmers getting started and staying in production. But then I hear it's not fundable, it's not sexy, it's not as important as some other barriers and some other focuses that we've seen, you know, from USDA and from government programs and from nonprofits. As someone who works in this issue, I think it is time for us to come together, and it is time for us to demand the attention for land access that it deserves and needs. And I think that we need all solutions on the table. So I welcome everyone's voices here today, and I'm happy to share what little I've garnered from working in this field with you all.
Thank you so much. And it's great to hear about a lot of the tools that Farmlink has to offer, because I feel like I always need a refresher. So with our limited time, I'm going to kind of loop one of my my second question here with one of the questions that's in the chat. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about an example that that's really promising or has come up a lot around land access. And so as we know, California is a state with mostly white farmers and even among small scale growers. And in an effort to build more equitable agricultural systems, there's this collective need, as we keep on talking about, for folks to step up and support beginning and BIPOC growers, who we believe are the future of small scale agriculture. But we individually don't have these solutions, and that's where collective action has a lot of strength. Change around the land access cannot rely solely on each and every beginning farmer kind of hitting their head against a wall and fighting for those barriers or through those barriers. And something that I've seen in my policy space and has been brought up a lot in recent conversations that I've had is the policy work behind the California Farmer Justice Collaborative. CFJC and others have wrote and continue to champion a bill that works to create a program to start addressing these inequities around land access. So something I wanted to kind of follow up with some of these panelists on is, what steps should folks on this call be taking to support beginning and BIPOC growers in their community? If folks are interested in adopting a similar model to some of what y'all have talked about, what's the first step that they can make? And I kind of floated or connected to this one question that was brought up is, yeah, land access is this new exciting topic for this particular farmer. And so what are the different categories of land access in like a more constructive way private ownership, public owners, local, state, and federal land, and kind of addressing some of the pros and cons for various models. I'm going to start with Leonard Diggs because I feel like it's been a while since we've heard from you, and then kind of hand it over to Kendra or Liya on some of those models.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. I want to just address in this, there's been a couple of statements about no answers, potentially, no solutions, potentially. But we do have a lot of the answers and a lot of the solutions. We've had them for a long time. There's been a lot of indigenous foodways that we've inherited over the many years, and lots of folk knowledge from people all over the world, that include the Latino and Latina folks that are looking to be able to have access to, and that Joaquin is representing in terms of all of the farmers who don't get credit as farmers because they're called farm workers for the knowledge that they have. And so the solutions are that we, as I said very briefly, we need to do more collaboration. We need to have more solidarity, and there needs to be more equity. So how does that really show up? I think in collaboration, it's not just doing your lone thing on the farm. A lot of farmers get out there, and a lot of people who want to get into farming get out there and want to just jump in and go to work by themselves and do their lone thing. And, we've had many generations of that as an experience, and it's not where it's really going anymore. We have to collaborate with each other. We have to find solidarity. And what does solidarity mean? It doesn't mean that we hang with each other for every single thing. It means that we find those issues that we can have agreement with each other on. And I learned that from Alicia Garza in her book, The Purpose of Power. And she talks a lot about what does power mean and how do you use power? And in part, it's about finding solidarity with people on certain issues that you can find solidarity on. We need housing. We need land access. And this issue of land tenure, to jump right in on that, is, do we all need to own land individually? We've seen that model quite a bit, and it hasn't necessarily worked. I don't think it's a bad model, but it doesn't mean that everybody who owns land is going to take responsibility for the things that are important to maintain the environment, to maintain their communities. Because as farmers, our main role is to feed our communities and to take care of the environment while we're doing it, not to destroy the community. So we may have better models where we have community-owned land and long tenure, 30, 40, 50 years, and ways to have succession planning, because that's the other thing that's gone on with agriculture that hasn't worked, is that farmers cash themselves out. They end up selling their land, selling their equipment so that they can retire on it. So we need some better succession planning in regards to that. And yet we do need farming at scale, as I like to call it. The reason that the 400 acres that we have matter is that a lot of farmers are farming on 1 to 5 acres, which is cool. It's great. But a lot of times you do a lot of specialty crops on that don't allow you to feed your local community as fully as the local community needs to be fed. We need to have farmers who have an interest in maintaining their environment farm at a large enough scale that they can feed their whole communities, not just the rich folks who can afford to buy CSA boxes, but the folks who are now getting these farm boxes after our COVID crisis and after our fire crisis, who just didn't have enough food in their family. Farmers need to feed all of those people. And we need to find ways to be able to do that in our communities and afford to do that on both sides, where farmers don't have to have broken down trucks and bad backs at the end of their tenure, that they can live middle-class lifestyles and send their kids to schools that are reasonable and take care of their lives, but still feed their communities. So it's a whole cabal of what farmers need, what our communities need, and what our environments need. And all of those at the same time have to be met, because if we farm as usual, or we take all of the resources and we aren't creating ecosystem products, ones that take care of the environment, and we get paid for the ecosystem services and for doing that as farmers and ranchers, then we're going in the wrong direction again. So it's all got to be done all at the same time.
Thanks, Leonard. I think we're hearing a lot of applause through this here chat to your comments, and I think what you've shared, and especially on re-envisioning the model, right, of like, do we all farmers need to own land, and thinking about a lot of these collective efforts that we're hearing from Joaquin and Kendra and Liya is a good starting point. I'm curious if other folks on the panel have comments to share and follow up, or if and some comments are, how do we do this? And that's the real question. And I think having these conversations are steps in the right direction, but I don't know if each individual person has that answer. But yeah, opening the floor to other panelists to comment, and then we'll open some more discussion time for other members of the audience.
So I grew up, in a small community in Mexico. The farming in my community, it was done through ejidos, centro ejidal, where about 30 farmers, growers used to get together every so often and make a discussion. And it's exactly what Leonard was talking about. It's about the collaboration of people that are farming right now. To be able to, to provide, food for our community, we have to be able to collaborate, and that's what the ejidos did in Mexico, in small communities. They still do. Have the access, have the knowledge, the education about what techniques they're implementing, about what seed they're using. So it's a collaboration to get the best product they can have, for the community. But it's hard to collaborate, when we don't have equity on the table. When we don't see equity, when we see somebody getting more benefits than others, it's hard to collaborate. We do all the same equal work, the recognition, for example, what the farm workers are doing. And I mean, let's be honest, 2020, the pandemic, it gave the spotlight to the farm workers. If it would not have been for the pandemic, the farm workers would still be in the shadows, would not be given the opportunity or the recognition, for the work that they do. So this, we have to learn something, from this pandemic, and say, we need our farm workers. If we need our farm workers, that means we need to have provide something better for them. Housing is one of them. I visit the farms on a daily basis. I see how the farm workers live. Right now, we have an issue with clean water. Water that's being contaminated, that our farm workers are still drinking. So, I mean, the collaboration of agencies, making the big moves, but not forgetting about our farm workers, or smaller farms, doing a little bit of research. When we started this, doing the research on the co-op, we had a conversation, for example, with members of the Hill Project, about how much income they were generating on a 2-acre land. With the rotational crops, they were generating about $60,000 a year. Okay, when we talk about a farm worker, bringing home, $25,000, working for somebody else, where is that equity? Where is the recognition for the work that they're doing? You know, I mean, collaborating with other groups is what we want to do. We collaborate. I mean, right now, dealing with the pandemic, it's a collaboration of, you know, or county health, the city, you know, different organizations, nonprofits, to provide and to keep our community healthy. That is a collaboration. Now we put that on a farming aspect, you know, what we're producing, we know about protecting our environment, about keeping our soils healthy. We have to do that. We have to recognize each other's work. If we don't do it right now, that is on the spotlight, a few years down the line, we're gonna forget about farm workers again. We're not giving the opportunity to the people to become successful. We want to continue farming. We want to make sure that our new generations are interested in farming, to continue to protect, you know, our environment, to protect, you know, protect our farmland, to protect our soils, you know, to protect our clean water. And we have to give them the opportunity to do so. If they see their parents struggling as a farm worker, they're going to do everything they can to walk away from farming. There's going to come, you know, organizations or groups coming around buying our farmland and develop our farmland. People have been trying to develop the coast for a long time, right? If we don't do anything with the farmland, it will not be long for them to develop this land. We know in the coastline, when the land sits empty for so long, then it becomes a protector of endangered species. And then farming is not available anymore. Farming is not allowed anymore. It becomes a wetland. And then, you know, the opportunity that should have been given to people to farm is lost. So let's collaborate, you know, let's find ways on how we can help our community become successful and continue the heritage of farming. Having access. Now we know, you know, working with posts is not something we want to do right now. Now we're going to go with a private owned land. You know, it will be probably more expensive to lease land from them to farm, but we want that opportunity. We want to give the farm workers the opportunity to become farmers. If we don't do that right now, if we do that in 10 years, the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take. So when an organization says, "Oh, we are, you know, supporting equity. We are, you know, equity is needed," show me that. Don't put it on the website. I don't want to see it on the website. If you have it on the website, then you better do it. What we're proposing to do is what we want. Opportunities for farm workers to become farmers, to make a living, to make a decent living. We have farm workers in Half Moon Bay in the coast that have worked for the same grower for 40 years. And they're still making almost minimum wage. 40 years. So where's equity at? Where's the collaboration? Where's the respect? Where's the spotlight for these farm workers?
Thanks, Joaquin. Yeah. I want to open up, well, a lot of folks actually have questions about, one, how to support Rancho San Benito, but also some questions about if they've got capital, if some folks on this call right now have money and have capital that that they want to kind of support and start being that mode of change in their communities. I'm wondering if maybe Liya, you can answer that piece on capital, and if Leonard or Joaquin, you want to answer, or Joaquin want to answer, hey, how can you support San Benito? We can go there, and if we have time, I do want to open it up to maybe one question where somebody can ask it virtually, but we'll just see how long these responses last.
So right now, you know, Rancho San Benito, right, It's about creating, you know, opportunity. You will not be recognized unless you are given the opportunity to see what you're capable of doing. Giving the opportunity to our farm workers, right? Is what we want. We want access to farmland. We have the funding to do it right now. We have the collaboration of all the agencies that I mentioned, you know, to protect our farmland, to protect our heritage. We want to implement the reverse of what it was done since the 50s and 60s, the pumping of nitrates and other chemicals into our soils that is killing our soil. We want to be able to do that. Right now with climate change, there's an opportunity to farm a variety of crops. Before it was artichokes, Brussels sprouts. Now, in the last 10, 15 years, there's been an increase of a variety of crops that are being farmed. At our farmers market, or farm workers will not be able to, to be able to buy some of the product that is sold at the farmers market. It's expensive, but it's healthy. And that's what we want to do. We want to be healthy. I want to be healthy. I don't want to be eating vegetables or fruits that are pumped with, with chemicals. Organic farming. I mean, we all know the research what's been going on in the Central Valley, in the Salinas Valley, about all the chemicals our farm workers were affected when they were sprayed by chemicals. Let's heal our soil first. Let's protect our motherland. And then we can heal, ourselves. But to do that, we have to give the opportunity, to the small farmer to grow. We just have to. That's where equity. If we want equality, we need equity first. Don't be asking for equality if you don't have equity. So this is what we do. This is what we're here for. Just to, if you can advocate for people that want to farm, advocate for them, to have access to farmland. That's what you can do. It doesn't have to be Rancho San Benito. It could be people in other communities. There's a lot of people interested in farming. I know somebody that I people that I've been on the phone with, people that I've met, throughout the few years from other communities. There's great programs that will teach you, the incubators, the co-ops, to get going. So support that, but give equal opportunity. Equality, please. Equity. Thank you.
Thanks, Joaquin. I think that's a conversation that we've had a lot about, defining the difference between equality and equity. Whereas equity is what we want, and some folks are thinking that equality is what we want. And I guess on that, we can pitch it to Liya real quick on if we're trying to rebalance the checkbook and move money from from white farmers or white landowners to BIPOC community members. What's the step that they can take? Is it reaching out to an organization like Farmlink? Or I think we've got Kendra back. She lost some her Wi-Fi for a minute. What's that first step? Because I think there's folks on this call that want to make that first step to supporting their community.
So the question is about donating money or paying money forward?
Yeah, I think that's what I've heard is donating money or buying land and creating a model like with Pie Ranch. And maybe Leonard can chime in too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is a network of wonderful farm service organizations that are represented here, and I'm seeing a lot of them on this webinar now who would be more than happy to take any kinds of donations to continue the great work that they are doing to serve the community of next generation farmers and ranchers in California and throughout the country. California Farmlink, obviously, you know, the little pitch, you know, we do pay that money forward. Direct donations can be made to Farmlink. Donations of land can be made to Farmlink. And we also have this thing called investor notes, where folks can actually invest in Farmlink's loan fund, and then we use those funds to lend out to socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. So yeah, there are wonderful programs in everyone's community that are doing related work to support farmers and ranchers, and they're all extremely worthy of your support. It's a bigger question about whether someone wants to, you know, start a community model, and more discussion than maybe we have time for, but maybe I'll pass it over to Kendra to talk about ways that folks can get involved in Agrarian Trust's model.
Thank you. Jamie, are we having a hard stop at 4?
Yes,
Okay.
sort of, but it's
That's
okay
okay.
if we go over.
I just wanted to really pick up. I wanted to thank Joaquin for your calling out that term equity, and equity of equity is really important in all of this. It makes me think about, I think one of the ways that what the 98% of the land and the farmland in this country is held by white people. A huge proportion of it, estimates of 20% of it are in, or 70% of it are in transition right now. There are tremendous opportunities for land to shake out of the grips of only white communities and to be reallocated and to be rethought, to dream about it differently. That's going to require, I think, a lot of the education that groups like Farmlink are doing with their landowner education program. Non-operator landowners are one of the most significant, and as you know, international farmland investors are who hold this land right now. We have to be educating ourselves as white communities about alternatives to just holding on to. Speaking of equity, it's that intergenerational transfer. Thank you, Prop 13, right, of land that allows for families to continue to have wealth from generation to generation, and it just amasses. So but I want to also appreciate what Leonard said, which is we want to steer away from assuming that land ownership is the only way to have equity. It is a very good way for farmers to build wealth if they're able to buy land. And I would never, I think farmers of color who have the opportunity to buy land and earn equity that way, more power to you. But what if we could take land off of that commodity market altogether, hold it by a community, then the whole community has is supporting those farmers with access. That tenure though is, there's sort of, I had like a light bulb go on several years ago working actually with a farm employee who wanted to buy the business that he had been foreman on and really the only important actor in for like 25 years. And he said, if I can't have access to this land, the business is not valuable at all. It's that's the secure tenure on that land that makes the business mean anything, and that would give that person an opportunity to become not just a farm employee, but actually a farm owner with his own equity. So I feel like as a community, we need to be thinking about what equity means, and we need to be thinking as white communities about how to loosen our grip on the means of production that so many of our primary producers have been locked out of. And Agrarian Trust has some great posts and feeds on our website about that. It's a topic that we talk about a lot. And I really look forward to continuing the conversation with any who are interested.
Wow. Well, that hour was jam-packed. One day we'll have to have a day-long session on this because it's impossible to talk about this enormous issue in a short amount of time. But I think we've covered so much, and I'm so grateful to Joaquin and Leonard and Liya and Kendra for sharing their perspectives and their thoughts on this. I think it's been very well received from a lot of these folks on this call. I will be following up with folks, and with the panelists' permission, I can share contact information and follow-up notes. And I just want to thank everyone for attending and asking really incredible questions and participating in the chat. And again, to the panelists for their stories and their expertise. Please check out other conference sessions on the website. I want to make a pitch for CAFF. If land access is a priority to you, if you're a farmer or a landowner or somebody on this call that is empowered and energized and wants to get involved in policy or a lot of the work that CAFF is doing around land access, please reach out to me. I will send my email in the follow-up email soon. So we want to do this as a community and as a collective. I think that was the undertone of a lot of this, and really start with a equity lens on everything. So yeah, I just thanks again, and yeah, I really appreciate everybody's participation. So have a good one.